We got to recognize a guy here who's worked hard for about a year to make this happen, who, thank God, he knows how to do this, because I don't, and it's a lot of work, but I support what he does. Craig Woolheater for putting this thing on. And thank y'all, and I mean, that's really the main thing is you guys being here. We're just providing the circus entertainment.
Half of the admission fee.
Yeah, basically half the admission fee went to the school system. So a great thing here. So we're going to do a little panel here, some Q&A. I'll point out the individuals we have up here, some who have participated in a panel for the first time last night. But on my left here, the big guy, as you can imagine, wore the suit in the movie The Legend of Boggy Creek. This is Keith Crabtree. This is the guy trying to catch the monster, Jerry Hestand. On this end, the greatest cryptozoologist in the world. I'm going to go ahead and say that. Yeah. My double, my brother, Ken Gerhard. This guy right here is also my brother, wears a hat and has a cool beard. This guy, you won't recognize him from the film because he looked a lot different back then, and he was a little smaller because he was the baby in the Ford scene, in the climactic scene. He was the little baby, the guy crying, adding to the tension. This is Aaron Ball. Well, we may tell that story. And this guy right here, representing his great late father, Smokey Crabtree. This is Jay Crabtree. And this guy, you may or may not recognize, but you surely know his scene in the film where he jumps through the door, crashes through. This is Glenn Carruth, Bobby Ford. And I'd also like to announce an unofficial but very welcome guest who's sitting over here. Do we have any Joe Bob Briggs fans? Well, this is Darcy the Mail Girl, Diana Prince, who has joined us here today. She's over here waving and filming, and so we're glad to have her here as well. Joe Bob wanted to come down this weekend for the screening, and he surely would have been here, but he's with the success of his new Shudder show, he's been pulled in all sorts of directions, so he couldn't make it, but Diana made it as well, so that's really cool. So we're going to do a little Q&A if you'd like to ask some questions of the speakers, or the guys in The Legend of Boggy Creek. If you want to ask something about the movie or the scenes or whatever, we'd love to have a couple of questions from the audience, so fire away. Yes, sir. The big fella in the brown shirt.
I'll speak up. Jay, what is your dad's most memorable, positive, thing he told you? Man, that was a great movie because.
Okay. The question here is, did Smokey ever say anything good about the movie?
The movie was a bit of a sore subject around our house, as far as I can remember. Everything about it, really. I'm sure y'all don't really want me to get too much into this. Y'all probably run me out of here if I talk too much about it, honestly. But positive,
Let's say, what did you feel about that?
positive. It did. It brought a lot of people together, and it's brought a lot of tourism to Fouke. The city of Fouke was against it for a long time, but I feel like they've started to embrace it and realize that this is a source of tourism, and let's be honest, this is the only reason anyone comes here. Right? I don't know.
Well, I come here for the delicious restaurants. There's pizza at Monster Mart and catfish at Cheryl's and burgers at Allen's, and honestly, there's good food. So there are things here. But yeah, Smokey obviously had a closer connection to the film and a personal thing going on. But his contribution to the legacy of Boggy Creek and being the Boggy Creek guy. He was the guy, the researcher. It can't be underestimated that we wouldn't probably be here if it wasn't for him, the movie, everything else in sequence. And we can just enjoy these things now. We don't have to worry about the business of Boggy Creek or who got paid for the film and whatever. It's not our business. Let's all just enjoy it. So that's a cool thing, and we learned a lot from Smokey, all of us, just, about outdoors and just a lot of great stories. You can't imagine. Okay, next question. There's got to be some questions. Yeah.
Let me ask, I didn't realize this was just reviewing the movie the other day. The actual time period that this was supposed to have happened when they first saw the creature and everything was the 1940s, right? Not the 1960s.
Well, the time period that's elapsed in the film is roughly from the 60s to the 70s.
Okay, but like the actual time when people saw it here, were in the 40s or were
The actual time span is the first sighting I date back to 1908.
Oh, 1908.
Now, the newspapers will say the 40s, but there were stories even before that. But the first one that kind of got into the papers. So when you see a summary of this, people just say starting in the 40s. But I've done a lot more research than those journalists and stuff. So roughly, we're looking at about 100 years of sightings, more or less. So the movie covered a decade's worth of time period, but yeah, about 100 years we're talking about. All right. Yeah.
I guess my question is, during the filming and production of the movie, what was the history, or was there a sense at the time we really are recreating something that a lot of people have witnessed and seen? Was there a sense of that? Was it making a movie and it's cool on a TV? I guess that's
Okay, the question he's asking is, what was the sense, the feeling at the time while they were making the movie? Were they knowing they were excited about reenacting what was going on, or did they even think beyond that? Like, what was the feeling as you filmed it?
There were some of us that thought it was going to do real good, and there were others that just like, yeah, they get a big laugh and everything. But I decided after about 2 weeks into it that it was going to be huge. I really did. And my intuition to this day is still about 95% right.
If you want to bet on something, run it through Keith first. Yeah, Aaron can cover that.
Yeah, my father, John, was the production designer and art director, and really the Legend of Boggy Creek got its genesis as an idea for a film between my father and Charlie. They worked in partnership at Charlie's ad agency, and that's when Leadwell provided the funding or the initial investment to greenlight this production work. They didn't know what they were doing. Nobody knew what they were doing. Tommy Clark, he was on our panel last night. He was a production assistant. Really, he was kind of the bag man after they floor-walled the movie. He would be going to the box office, picking up the cash, throwing it in the trunk, and sending it to the hotel where Charlie and his wife Flo were. And, they'd be giggling, counting the piles of single-dollar bills and $5 bills that they'd stack up on the mattress. And it's kind of funny. I think it was about I think it was expensive, like a $5 ticket. I think that's what I've heard. Do you remember? Did anybody remember what the original ticket price was? I think I remember hearing $4 or $5, but yeah. So, but it was a big deal, and they needed, they had to recoup the money from having but nobody knew what they were doing when they were making this movie. I mean, first time everything. First time my father was ever doing any production design work. He was responsible for modifying the suit, but adding wigs, tearing this monkey suit apart and making it something that looked like what it ended up looking like in the movie. But nobody knew what they were doing, and the intent wasn't to make a big movie. The intent was to make a local interest film. I mean, they were really just wanting to do something to highlight the region, something that was really designed for the community to see. It just ended up becoming a national success. So, yeah, they set out to recreate a lot of the scenes, and they did that in earnest. Charlie really did believe in this legend, and I think throughout his career, he was attracted to folklore and to what people believed in and wanted to bring that to life. Because the way I look at it, some people have asked me, well, do you think it's real? Do you think the creature's real? And I say, I know it's real. And the reason why I know it's real is because so many of us believe it. We've kind of believed it into existence. We wouldn't be sitting here if it weren't real. So that's kind of the way I look at it. And that's, I think, how Charlie looked at it. I think it's how my father looked at it.
Yeah. The story of Herb Jones shooting his foot in the boating accident. Herb Jones is a real guy, and what you see in the movie, that's him, and he did live down on Mercer Bayou, and Jerry and I have gone down there to the location where the shack used to be and dug up remnants of stuff, moonshine bottles, what have you. He shot he had a gun in the boat, and it went off and shot through his foot. That's a legit story, and he's sticking to it. Herb Jones is certainly a character people ask about a lot, and I've gotten to know some of the family members. He's a real guy. Yes? The question is, did Charles Pierce have a stunt double when you jump through the door?
No, he didn't. And when I ran through it, when I ran through the door, I didn't. Well, he'd sawed some of it, they said. So I was hoping he did. If that thing solid would knock you out, but I hit through it just right, and I landed on the chair like I was supposed to with my head banging into it. And he says, "That's a good take."
It was not a high-budget film. They had one door, and like you said, they sawed it a little bit just right. And Glenn did his own stunts. He had to do it in one take. That was all you had, because didn't have another door. So luckily it worked. And when you see the film in the restored version, you get the full effect. You see it very clearly. It was a great stunt. So no, there was no budget for stunt people. In fact, Philip Bradley was telling me what I thought was one of the best stories. In the scene where there's the young man, he says he's going to take every opportunity to get a buck, and he hears something, and he gets the gun, and he starts running, and he ends up seeing the creature, and he's shooting at it. Well, he told me they were shooting cotton wads out of that gun. Was that right? And they were like hitting Keith, and they kept shooting the scene over and over, and he said, poor Keith is getting pelted by these things, and Keith said, could you just aim over here and shoot the other direction? But he's like, Pierce just said, it's got to look real, shoot at him. So he kept, he was hitting you with these cotton wads?
Yeah, but dude, that was a pretty good distance. It was more comical than it was serious.
But great, just to think about how they filmed that. But when you watch the film, it looks so realistic. The reactions and the monster, the way you move.
All that was, a lot of my shootings was just me in the woods, and then when they put the movie together is when they called it splicing and stuff. But one of the parts, they was wanting a stunt driver, so I was pretty wild at the time. they were going to have me swerving the car, and I told him, I said, why don't you just film the car slowly swerving and then speed it up, and they did that when the sighting got down on 71 South, and that's how that was made.
There you go. That's the way to get yourself having to out of doing a stunt. Yeah. Now, Glenn did a stunt. Who's seen the Bootleggers film? It's harder to find. That's Pierce's second film, which is a really great film. And Pam's working on restoring that one too. And Glenn did some stunts in that one. So that was a cool one. Yeah. So the question here is, was the film shot in relative sequence to the way it plays out? Was it shot, and Keith was already saying, yeah, they just shot a lot of sequence of him in the woods and then later stuck it in the right places, and I'm sure maybe you know.
It's not shot in the sequence of the film. No, they had Charlie was really, he was well read and well studied on filmmaking by the time he got his hands on this. I don't mean to make it sound like nobody knew what they were doing. It is true, no one had ever worked on a film before, on a major film. But Charlie and my father really did pull together the research for how to build an effective project plan for large-scale filmmaking. So they knew how to make the most out of the money that they had and the budget that they had, which by necessity means that you're going to consolidate locations, you're going to consolidate talent. You don't necessarily have all the people available at all times. So, they were really polished in that. As a matter of fact, my father, just getting out there and working with lenses and gels and filters to get the right light diffusion, to work with Charlie, who did his own DP work on the movie, all of that, they really, it was the first time out, but they had studied. So they kind of knew what they were doing. It's kind of like if you're working on a car and you've never torn the engine apart before, but you kind of know what you're getting into, and you kind of do an okay job doing it, right? For the first time, right? And that's kind of what it's like. Watching YouTube videos helps, but they didn't have that back then.
Yes, sir?
How influential is this movie to you and your interest in this stuff and to dedicate your lives to looking for Bigfoot or strange creatures?
The question is to the cryptozoologists /or Bigfoot hunters and to the Lyle Blackburns, how influential was the movie The Legend of Boggy Creek on what you've done with your life? Ken, what have you done with your life?
I'm a professional weirdo, and I'm proud of it. So, you can't understate how influential that movie was on, like I said, my entire generation of Bigfoot researchers. Virtually every Bigfoot investigator I know that's in my rough age group, Legend of Boggy Creek, man, that's what hooked me. And like I said earlier to my lecture, it was really the 1-2 punch of seeing the Patterson-Gimlin film, which for me was like on a Saturday morning during a cartoon break. And then The Legend of Boggy Creek came out about that same time period. And then, of course, 1976, you had, Bigfoot on the $6 Million Man and In Search Of, and it was like it all just came down the pike at the same time. So I think anyone that already had a little bit of a curiosity in Bigfoot, but it's hard to define in terms of what makes that switch go on. But for many of us, myself included, the first time I saw the Patterson-Gimlin film, it was just boom. I have to somehow be connected to this. And admission here, I grew up in the north, Minnesota, okay, so I wasn't down in the south, so I don't know exactly what kind of impact, but Legend of Boggy Creek was showing at some local theaters, and I think I probably, like most people, caught it on The Late Show on TV one night. But again, all of that stuff happened around the same time, and it was almost like You know, and not to be too philosophical, it was almost like the forces of the universe just bombarding me with different Bigfoot imagery and things, but it all kind of came together at the right time. And again, I think the real importance of the Legend of Boggy Creek is that it moved the Bigfoot phenomenon all the way from the Pacific Northwest, and suddenly it was in your backyard. And I think that's what really connected to a lot of Bigfoot investigators. It was something you could go out in the woods right down the road and potentially look for a Fouke monster. It wasn't kind of a disconnection to the Pacific Northwest phenomenon. So,
Jerry, do you like the movie The Legend of Boggy Creek?
I was hoping we could watch it twice last night. I mean, we saw it once. Let's just watch it again. But yeah, Craig, Ken, Lyle, Nick, everybody we talked to from coast to coast. It's the Legend of Boggy Creek. There was a Patterson-Gimlin film, A Legend of Boggy Creek, another movie called Creature from Black Lake that come on right after that. Just movie after movie, it just hooked us, and yeah, I kind of like it.
And I guess I don't have to say I love the film, and it inspired my life in a way. So, yeah, definitely had a huge influence on me. Yes, sir.
Associated with the film, surprised that it got a G rating at the time it was released. Was there an MPAA at the time?
The question is, was anybody surprised that it had a G rating, or how did it get a G rating? Any thoughts on that?
There was a rating system, and the G, when it received national distribution through Halco, it was deemed a G-rated film just simply because of its content. A lot of what went into that deciding factor was the nature-adventure aspect of the film. This was something that was really being birthed into Genesis by Walt Disney at the time. And Walt Disney had, that series of adventure films. Nature films and adventure films and wildlife films, and all of these really were kid-friendly. They were, I think it wasn't necessarily a strategy, because Charlie originally meant for this to be local interest, and he wanted to highlight nature, and he wanted to highlight the geography and terrain around Fouke and around Texarkana. But by interspersing all of this wildlife, nature photography, it harkened back to the genesis of what Walt Disney was doing, and people immediately felt as though it belonged in a family-friendly genre of filmmaking. And so I think that more than anything contributed to the G rating. I think if Charlie had not designed the film to be interspersed with so much nature and wildlife and adventure, it would have had a different coloring, and the feel of the film would have been probably not something that would have been merited a G rating. Yeah.
The question here is, are there any storyboards or anything surviving from that? Which the answer is no. I mean, and what was the length that was shot? Does anybody know? Keith, Glenn, do you know how long he took to film the whole thing? I mean, 6 months is not even that long. He shot it relatively fast. I mean, how many days did it take to shoot the Ford scenes?
Oh, Lord. Actually, I think about 2 weeks to shoot most of them. And we had to go through a lot. Monster attack, jumping off the commode, and falling in the hallway, going to the hospital with a hole in my sock. No, thank God. But I enjoy it, and everybody worked hard and done a good job. far as I'm concerned, everything is perfect, huh?
So if Glenn said around 2 weeks to shoot the Ford scene, which is a big chunk of the movie, I mean, it was yeah. So it was pretty short, pretty go. It was not a lot. Like I said, it was one take on that. There's not this business of shoot it, 10 times, and none of that. So it had to move fast in order, Ledwell gave the money, and that's all there was. And after that, they had to sell it themselves to get the rest of the money.
It had to have been, because my father went on to do 4 subsequent films throughout the 70s of Charlie's, all of which I was in. And none of those production shoots went over 5 weeks that I remember. There may have been an exception for Gray Eagle, and I think that had to do with inclement weather. They had to space out the production, and they may have skipped a couple of weeks or had to take a couple of weeks off and move into post-production for what they had shot already and then go back and shoot. That extended the production length, but I don't think anything lasted over 5 weeks for the other films. So I cannot imagine it was more than a 3 or 4 week production shoot for Boggy Creek.
Yeah, you go. The question is how long after it was released did people realize it was a hit, which just some of immediately. I mean, there was lines around the block because there was already all this press. I mean, read all those newspaper clips in the Texarkana Gazette, not only about the Fouke Monster sightings were still fresh, but they had been documenting the making of the movie the whole time. Everybody was ready to see this thing. So when it opened at the Paramount, which is the Perot Theater where we're showing now, I mean, there was lines around the block. You had to wait for the next showing. And I've heard that from various people here in Fouke who went to the event. So it was immediate, of course, and then they had to try to scrape up the money to run some other prints so they can show in other cities. And they didn't even have enough money to make the prints to be able to show them in Shreveport and stuff, so they had to scrape that together and get some funding and show. And once, same situation in Shreveport and other places, it was just an immediate thing. And that later on, Halco came in and they had showed in Joy Theaters, which was owned by Joy Houck, and Halco recognized that, hey, I think we got something here. We'll give you the money to make some more prints and we'll show this in the theater. So boom, it was like a wildfire. Perfect time. Yeah. The question is, what is our opinion on what a remake would do, maybe to appeal to younger audiences now, or what have you? I mean, my stance on it, there's a magic to it that can't be quite remade. This is not your average movie, so the attempt to do that.
I would say that this restoration is probably what's going to do that. It is like it's just new life has been breathed into this film because of the restoration work that's been done on it. I mean, you can see detail in this movie that you never have been able to see before, and it is a whole different film. And I think that's going to do it. Like Lyle said, I think that it existed in a time and a place that was a perfect storm for people of our generation, that captured our imaginations. That's faded now because of, it was just a magical time. But I think a remake, I don't know. I think more than that, the restoration of the existing legendary film would do it.
I just have a couple of thoughts on that. I think he's right. First of all, for many of us that saw it for the first time in the 70s, it felt like it was a documentary. And that's one of the allures, is that you felt like you were watching this stuff actually unfold in front of you, and I don't think they could recreate that possibly. Also, because I work in television a lot, I can tell you that one of the biggest problems we have producing TV shows is there's just too many cooks in the kitchen. You have people at the network, you have people at the production company, you have all these producers, and so it's hard to keep that kind of strong creative vision. And I think one of the strengths of Legend of Boggy Creek was the fact that you just had Charles and his father, just very, very focused on what they were trying to do. And I think they were able to deliver that message because of that. So.
That's absolutely correct. I mean, and to go along with that, I mean, with this film in particular, unlike Charlie's other films that were union films, I mean, he then started working with professional film industry protocol. With Legend of Boggy Creek, there was none of that. So, for example, that's why there were no stunt doubles. That's why, you get shot at for real. You could get away with that. Similarly, I mean, you could never do some of the things that they did during this movie, during this shoot. You just get into trouble for it. I mean, they couldn't get me to cry in the climatic scene, and they needed me to cry, and I just wasn't a fearful kid, I mean, everything was magical to me. They even tried to get Steve Ledwell, and I think they tried to get everybody parading around in the monster suit to scare me. I wouldn't scare or anything like that. So they figured out what they were going to do. My father and Charlie, they got down real close to me and they said, "Aaron, your mother is never coming back. She's left forever. You will never, ever see your mother ever again." And then they handed me to Bunny D's. And all hell broke loose. I mean, that was it. So all that crying you hear in that scene, that's me knowing I'm never going to see my mother again. Well, that's something you would never, ever, ever do in a production. Certainly not a union picture or a picture with protocol. So they were able to get away with a lot that you could never get away with in any other step of the way. But that led to a genesis of creativity, right? We were able to accomplish something. They were able to really create a genre-defining film, that had never been done before. Docudrama had never existed before this. It's a long, meandering way to get around.
I mean, what's your opinion? Do you think they could ever remake a movie like this in modern times? You have kids.
I think they actually approached my dad about a remake at one point, and he told them, "You're going to have to pay me $1 million up front before I put my name on anything, because got burned before already."
Right. I try to tell that to the networks, it never works. I haven't gotten $1 million. All right, let's take maybe one more question from this lovely lady here that came here all the way from Nebraska, and then we'll wrap it up so we can you guys can get some more autographs, visit with these guys, and hang out. And I think we got a few more bus tours, and I got some donuts to eat. I hadn't had anything to eat, and I keep staring at the donuts. Okay, Harriet, what you got? The question here, was she talking about the monster scream or her scream? Okay, the question is what is the story behind the scream of the monster, the howl of the monster that's featured in the film? There's been some debate about that, and of course Pam knows best, and I know for a fact that they went into the woods with Smokey, and they did do some audio recordings. So I think what's blended into that thing, and there may be other things in post-production, but there is an actual scream that they recorded in the woods that is part of that scream. And so, well, I'm sure, when you do a soundtrack, you're always, what you can get in the audio.
I can't speak to the scream, but how many people like the dead cat? Okay. So I don't know. Dead animals seem to be my father's bag. So all through Charlie's movies, he loved working with the dead animals. And this cat was found dead, and my father found the dead. He would get roadkill and use roadkill in the movies, you know, and then he would shape it, he'd spray them, he'd paint them, he'd figure out some way to make them look just right. Well, he was so proud of his cat, but he couldn't get it to conform in quite the way he wanted to, so he froze it first. And he figured out once he froze it, he could shape it. It became malleable, and he could get it to be contorted and look exactly like he wanted it to look. Anyway, I thought you might like hearing about the cat. About the cat? Does anybody have any questions about the production?
Hey, if you're on the 3 o'clock tour, you need to report to the bus now. Jerry is assembling the crew. 3 o'clock tour. So yeah, that you can really see the dead cat in this new enhanced version. You can see its eyeballs. It's amazing. So the answer to your question is yes, there's some monster scream that's legit, I believe, blended into that and probably studio enhanced by the post-production to make it as effective as possible. So yeah, that movie blends reality with good filmmaking, sensational build-up storytelling, cinematography, and is based on real reports. So I think that's why that movie's magic. It blends real stuff, authentic accents, real people, so amazingly effectively. And the actors, I mean, Glenn, he wasn't a veteran actor. He pulled all that stuff off on the fly, one take. As you know, he wasn't somebody who had been trained in Hollywood for years. So the performances that were captured on that film are just amazing, and they last till today, and it's great. So that's all I can say. So let's give a big round of applause for these guys. It's an honor to have them with us today, and if you want some more stories, talk to Glenn. He can tell you some things. Aaron's an accomplished guy in opera and all kinds of other stuff. Ken knows anything about cryptids, and Jay here is just a great Crabtree, who it's a pleasure having gotten to know the family over the years and to be sitting here. And we're glad that somebody is representing Smokey here today. So thanks so much to you guys.